Yalimad everyone, hope you all are doing well. Our session this evening is entitled Music, Islam and Spirituality, exploring devotional music from South Asia. In our session today, we will explore what is music, especially within the Muslim context, and why the term music is so debatable within the understanding of Muslims and their interpretations. Then I will explore the Muslim contributions in the field of music and art, and then I will explore three different kinds of genres, devotional genres from South Asia, namely Qawwali, Kafi and Ginan, and at last we will end our session by understanding that how powerful the role of music has been historically as part of Muslim cultural development, social development, but also their spiritual development. So let's begin first with what is music. Music was the fire that burnt heart and soul by Amir Khusro. A famous saying in South Asia is Mausiki Ruh ki Ghiza hai. Music is the feast for the soul. We may have heard a famous poem by Maulana Rumi where he uses a reed flute as a symbol of human being. Listen to the story of a reed flute. Since I was cut from the reed bed, I have made this crying sound. Anyone apart from someone he loves understand what I say. Anyone pulled from the source longs to go back. The metaphor of a reed flute reminds us that our origin is also from the one who is the creator of us all. When we describe music and the idea of the music and the sound, we look at different cultures and different civilizations, how music is defined in different contexts. Such as in Hindu literature, one can find this beautiful line, Nada Brahma hai, sound is the God, sound is the energy. Everything in the universe is created by the sound. And they use the particular sound called Om. If you look at within the Muslim context, as we know and as God has revealed in the holy book of the Quran, that the entire universe was created by the word utterance of kun, to be. So one can see the similarities that the power of sound and its energy is all around us. Sound produces an influence on the soul in two directions. One is an account of its spatial composition, that is physical content. The other on account of its being similar to the soul, by Ibn Sina or Avicenna. So the role music plays in the Muslim culture, and especially within our own self journey, is limitless. Listening Sama is the divine influence which stirs the heart to see Allah. Those who listen to it spiritually attain to Allah, and those who listen to it sensually fall into heresy. By Shaul Numan, a famous Egyptian Sufi from 9th century. What is music? Etymologically, the term music originates from the mid-13th music, from Old French musique from 12th century, and directly from Latin musica, the art of music. Also includes poetry. In the Greek mythology, there were 7 goddesses which were the goddesses of music, art, culture, and poetry. One can find a similar idea in the Hindu tradition as well, whereas the goddesses of knowledge and music is Saraswati. So this idea was originated into Latin from Greek in 12th century, and then from Latin it was translated into different European language and as well as the Middle Eastern and South Asian languages. So when we define the term music, we need to understand that the term music and how it is really being debatable as part of the Muslim discourse was not even coined or was not even there during the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in 6th, 7th century. So it's a later development. There were different terminologies which were used at the time of Prophet Muhammad, such as takbir or ghina, but not the term music. So if somebody really argues that music is forbidden in the practice of Muslim discourse, one really needs to inform that person that the idea and the terminology of the music, the way we discuss in this day and time, was not even there during the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. In the Western context, when we are talking about music, it has 4 elements. The structure of music has 4 elements. Number 1 is rhythm and meter, tempo. So the sound which you hear must have a rhythm, proper meter, tempo. The second one is pitch, which is melody and harmony, very important. The third one is dynamics, which is loudness and softness. And the last is form and sonic quality, such as timbre, texture, color. So if you hear any sound which has these 4 elements, rhythm and meter, pitch, dynamic, and form and sonic qualities, one can really define that sound into the category of music. So when a Westerner visit any of these Muslim countries and hear the call to prayer, for example, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. So you see, it has a pitch, loudness, softness, dynamics, meter. So for Westerners' ear, they may sound as music. Similarly, when we recite Ginan or Tasbih, for example, Ya Ale Nabi Aulade Ali Ya Mushkil Khusha Ya Hazir Imam, or Ya Ali Ya Muhammad Ya Ali Ya Muhammad Ya Ali Ya Muhammad Ya Ali Ya Muhammad. It has the melody, meter, loudness, softness, a pitch. So for those who don't come from the South Asian or the Muslim context, their ear may experience as music. Similarly, when we recite Naat, which is in the praise of Prophet Muhammad, Hamd, which is in the praise of course, Allah Almighty, all of these follow certain meters. We have often heard within the Smiley context that please give Ginan Varo or Qasida Varo to so and so person because he has such a tuneful or soulful voice, or his raga is really proper, he sings really in the proper raga. But we often use the word recitation. But if you go back to the recitation and try to unpack it, it follows the certain tune. certain meter, certain pitch, dynamics, loudness, softness. That is why in the Western terminology, it can be called music. That is why when we use the idea of the term music, we really need to understand that this idea of music is not really universal. As I have explained to you earlier, that the term music, or in Arabic al-Musiqi or Musiqi, comes from Latin. So when Muslims think of the idea of the music, it reminds them of the Western understanding of music, which has completely different connotation. There are different terminologies which are used in the Middle East, such as qira, recitation, kina, takbir, raising the voice. In the Indian tradition, which is really significant, especially in the South Asian context, we use the word raga or rasa. Interestingly, the word raga doesn't even mean music. It means color. It comes from Sanskrit language, and it is really beautiful and more profound and more wider concept than the term music. Because through raga, through sound, you create different colors. And through colors, you create your own story. Rasa, which means mood. There are 9 moods one can create through the sound. So the spirituality and ecstasy of the sound goes much deeper in the South Asian context than perhaps in the Western context. Then there are other terminologies which are also used, such as Arabic word zikr, recitation, sama, listening to the music. Then the word ma, which is used in the Japanese music. In South Asian music, and especially in the South India, they use the word kriti, which is the melodic skeleton within the South Asian and South Indian music. And in Javanese music, they use the word balangun. So what I'm trying to unpack here is, we really need to be careful when we are using the term music, and we think that the word music or the term music is universally applicable. That is not the case. And when we are talking about the idea or the concept of music, and we try to echo that idea and apply into different concepts from the different parts of the world, it may cause certain confusion. According to Professor Regular Barkat Qureshi, music is the theologically controversial concept within Islam. However, musical sound plays a highly significant role in articulating the singularly verbal message of Islam, both in its universal Quranic form and in the form of local traditions. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that among the creations, God's creations, the greatest beauties are the fine intonation of a beautiful voice. And that is the reason why one of the foremost and important companion of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Bilal Habshi, was selected to recite the call to prayer, adhan. When we are discussing about the idea of music within the Muslim context and South Asian context, we need to understand that the orality of the music in South Asia is very different than in the Western discourse. In the Western discourse, in the Western context, we use the written music, sheet music, and people don't memorize each tune while they are playing the music. They follow the notations. In the Indian subcontinent, the more emphasis is given in the orality of the sound. It is the same idea one can see within the Muslim context as well. How Quran is always memorized by heart. There are Hafizul Quran, those who memorize the entire Quran, can be seen in many parts of the Muslim world. In fact, there is a tradition in some of the Muslim world where a child is born, a Qari who usually recite the call to pray and also the Quran, recite and chant the Quranic verses in the ear of a baby. Memory in the South Asian context has been given a lot of importance. And when music is attached to the words, why do we remember some of the poem from our childhood? And when we are hearing about the tune, we always remember the words. So tune, raga, become a very important spiritual tool to remember those Quranic verses, Ginan, Sufi rhymes, and become a part and parcel of our understanding. So in the South Asian context, we don't write down the music. The orality of the music is as part of our memory. And if you go even deeper, it is a part of our heart. We memorize everything by heart. In the olden tradition, if you ask our parents and our grandparents, we would know that many of our elders, when they were reciting Ginans, they were reciting Ginans by heart. So some of these traditions, when we are talking about Ginan, Quranic recitation, Adhan, they all share a lot of musical ideas such as meter, rhyme, pitch, timbre. But we don't use the term music to define those recitations. Because the idea of music within the Muslim context and even in the South Asian context has completely different meaning. When an outsider who doesn't have any understanding of the orality and the tradition of South Asia visit some of these countries and listen to the call to prayer Adhan, for their mind it is a soothing music. When they hear somebody is reciting the Quran, they hear the notes, timbre, softness and loudness of this wonderful text. In fact, in the Middle East, till today, people who wants to become a classical musician, they go back to their school and learn the tajweed, proper pronunciation of the reciting Quran. And we have many examples for it. For example, Kulthum, a famous Egyptian singer, her earlier development, earlier training was based on the recitation and the training and the proper training, the tajweed of the Quran. There is a beautiful book called The Art of Reciting the Quran, in which Christina Nelson has explored this idea that why there are different traditions within the Muslim context where you would find different reciter reciting in different way, different maqam, different meters, different moods, and it really impacts its listeners. We all have heard the story that Hazrat Umar, once he wanted to go out and kill Prophet Muhammad. Somebody told him, before you go and kill the Prophet, why don't you go and see your own sister, what she's doing? And when Hazrat Umar went to see his sister at the door, he was stopped listening to her sister. She was reciting the Quran aloud. And right away, that moved his heart. He cried, he pleaded, and he accepted Islam. In the earlier years, Islam was not written as a text. Quran was not written as a text. People were trained. They were Hafizul Quran, and they were sent as a messenger with the text as well later on to share the messages to different parts of the world. So it is the sound, the word Quran comes from the word Qira. Qira means the recitation. So when we are talking about the Quran, we are talking about the experience of the revelation which Prophet had, which was not only as a written text which we have as a book called Quran, but it was also as an experience which he received and he transformed and shared with the people, which is the orality of its text, the power of its text. And one can see, even within the Muslim context, Prophet Daud, Prophet David had a miracle. He was blessed with the profound music. And when he was calling his beloved God, Allah, the birds were singing along with him. Now let's look at the Central Asian tradition. One can see that the Nasr-e-Khusro tradition and in the impact of Rubab. In 1995, when Maulana Hazar Imam first time visited Tajikistan, the Jamaat of Tajikistan gave a present to Imam, and that was the Rubab. And they told Imam that through this Rubab, through the teaching of Nasr-e-Khusro, our forefathers have kept this faith. When I asked during my field research in Tajikistan about what does the term Rubab means, and I was given two different explanations to this beautiful instrument. One was Rab Bab. Rab means God and Bab means door. So if you want to enter the door of your Lord, then you have to play Rubab. And another explanation was given to me by another woman, a musician from Tajikistan. It is called Ruh Bab. Ruh means soul and Bab means door. So if you want to enter into the world of soul, then you have to play the Rubab. So that is why Rubab has been considered by the Central Asian as a sacred instrument. And if you look at in the Indian subcontinent, we have many Garbis, we have many Ginans which have orally transmitted from generation to generation. And they are based on many different ragas, tune, which we will discuss later when we are discussing about Ginan. So the spiritual music and its impact has so deep that it has kept our faith alive for centuries. Let's move back to the historical context of Muslims and their contribution in terms of music. When we are thinking about guitar, we often think that guitar is a Western instrument. But if you go back to the history of guitar, in the Western history, it comes from 14th, 15th century from Spain. And from Spain, it arose and it went into the entire Europe and other parts of the world. And we all know historically that until 15th century, Muslims have ruled Spain. So today, when we play guitar, it comes from the Middle East instruments such as oud and also kitara, which were very popular not only within the Middle East but also in Spain. And they are the forefathers of the guitar. Similarly, when we play piano, we often think that the piano is a Western instrument. But the idea of the piano, the notes of the piano, in fact, when we read the notes in the Western music in this day and time, the notes, for example, you have C, D, E, F, G, okay, Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti. Their origins are based in Arabic music. The whole idea of piano, if you open the piano, you would see you play certain kind of, like you really pluck the different strings. And it comes from the 10th century, especially the musical instrument which is called qanun. And Al-Farabi used to play, a famous Muslim philosopher, theologian from 10th century. Al-Farabi was a great master of music. Now let's talk about a famous Western musical instrument which we called it violin. If you look at the history of violin, you would find that the violin and its roots comes from Central Asia. Khamanche, It's an ancient instrument from Central Asia. And many people think, and in the Indian subcontinent we have sarangi, which go back to at least 700-800 years. So one can see that in the Silk Route, in the idea of the cultural exchange, many of these musical instruments and their roots are coming from the Muslim lands. And if you look at Akhwan Safa, which was written by Ismaili missionaries from 9th, 10th century, there is a terminology which is used in one of the epistles. There were 52 epistles, and one of the epistles is on music, where it is described by a very profound concept which is called music of the spheres. And that idea is that music, whatever a composer composes, he or she composes from his own mind. But if you look at many inspirational musicians such as Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan or Michael Jackson or Ustad Amir Khan or Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Saab, all of these musicians, one thing was very common to them, that they were saying that this is not the music which they compose. It comes from the world unseen. We are just a vessel. So when a composer composes the music, and we are talking about divine music, so divine music is already there. It's the music of the spirit. You need to tune yourself into the zone so you are able to connect yourself into the world unseen. In Qawwali tradition, Amir Khusro's kalam, Chhap tilak sab chini, mose naina milai ke, you have taken away my looks just by looking at me in one glance. Or kholo parda sana mukha dekho, hasi hasi mukha dikhlao. Mere Sahib ji, we have a same idea in our Ginan that, remove the veil, let eye meet the eye. So symbolically, poetry, music, art, they provide us a space which is beyond this physical world. And one is able to transfer himself or transcend himself from this physical being to a spiritual being. If you look at, for example, Shabad tradition, which Guru Nanak started, and which is the Sikh tradition, one can see that Guru Nanak's, his own first disciple was a Muslim musician, Mardana, and he used to play rubab. So all his composition, Sikhs, Guru Nanak's compositions are based on the composition which Mardana has composed for him. And they were wandering, they were traveling from places to places where they were performing these songs. And one can find similar stories of Pir Shams, where he went to Analwad and he composed Gharbis, and people started to dance along with him. Gharbi is one of the genre from Gujarat tradition. So you would see that, all of these Garbis are based on Gujarati Garba Dhal rhythm. So in the religious context, it is very interesting and very profound that music, poetry provide layers of meaning, layers of mystical meanings and symbols, analogies, through which one is able to understand the deeper meaning of their faith, and also provide them light. Through that light, their life and their purpose of life become even more meaningful. So now let's move on to the three genres which I have talked about earlier: Qawwali, Kafi and Ginan from Indian subcontinent. These three genres are extremely profound and very important when it comes to their devotional and musical and poetical nature. So let's start first with Qawwali. The word Qawwali comes from Arabic roots. Qawl means saying or utterance. So Qawwal, who are the professional musicians, and then they have a group of people accompanying them, and they have a group which performs together. Qawwali became very well known in the Western world through Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, but before then Sabri brothers really popularized it, especially with their Qawwalis, and they were celebrity also in Indian subcontinent, especially in Pakistan. Barde Joli and Tajdar-e-Haram, some of these Qawwalis, a lot of new musicians and singers have sung and became really popular, and especially in Bollywood, they like to copy everything, whatever they find interesting, because for them copyright is their right to make copies, so they copy a lot of these things. But anyways, the word Qawwali comes from Arabic language, call, and according to the tradition, it was started by this genre, was invented by Hazrat Amir Khusro from 14th century, and he was a Chishtiya Sufi, and he was a disciple of Nizamuddin Aulia in Delhi. And the beautiful part about Qawwali is, if you look at in a historical context, even from Dargah, the shrine context, it is extremely religious. It is just, I would say, about 100 years or so that one is able to hear the Qawwali music, of course, through different mediums such as CDs and online medium, and of course the stage performances. But the real Qawwali, if you really want to experience Qawwali, it only takes place at the shrine of the Sufi master. Now I will talk to you about the popularity of the Qawwali music, especially in modern times. It was because of the popularity of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan's performances, especially in England. He signed the world music label and he became a phenomenon. His influence was so wide that many of the Bollywood composers started to copy his music, and especially his tune. In 1995, Anand Bakshi stole one of his very popular Qawwali, the Mast Kalandar Mast, and changed it into Tu Cheez Badi Hai Mast Mast, which was done in a very Qawwali format. Next year, Anu Malik copied one of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan's traditional composition, which is written by Baba Bulle Shah, Mera Piya Garaya, Ho Lalni, and he converted into Ho Ramji. And then he also copied Allahu and he turned it into I Love You. And some of these things really bothered Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan when he was alive, because he felt that you cannot take away the spiritual kalam, poems and songs which are written in the praise of Allah or Muhammad or Ali and perhaps some of their Sufi masters, and turn them into very cheaply into a Bollywood music and completely change the dynamic and the context. But I think our younger generation must know and understand that many of these genres, especially Qawwalis and the call and the poems by Baba Bulle Shah, such as Sarmas, Shah Abdul Latif Bidai, and the list goes on, are very spiritual in nature. You may have heard recently Barde Joli by Adnan Sami Khan. That was also copied into Bollywood and became overnight extremely popular. And now perhaps maybe through Coke Studio one can also find some of these renditions, sometimes not given a due credit to its original composers, which are not really the right way. Now I would like to demonstrate one of the very famous Qawwali sung by late Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. तेरे ही नाम से, तेरे ही नाम से, तेरे ही नाम से हर इब्तिदा है, तेरे ही नाम तक हर इंतहा है। तेरी हमदो सना अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह कि तू मेरे मोहम्मद का खुदा है। अल्लाहू 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 अल्लाहू। ये ज़मीं जब न थी, ये जहां जब न था, ये ज़मीं जब न थी, ये जहां जब न था, चांद सूरज न थे, आसमां जब न था, चांद सूरज न थे, आसमां जब न था, राज़े हक भी किसी पर आया जब न था, राज़े हक भी किसी पर आया जब न था, तब न था कुछ यहाँ, तब न था कुछ यहाँ, था मगर तू ही तू। अल्लाहू 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 अल्लाहू। क्यों पिया इब्ने हैदर ने जामे फना, क्यों पिया इब्ने हैदर ने जामे फना, खाल खिंचवाई तबरेज़ ने क्यों भला, खाल खिंचवाई तबरेज़ ने क्यों भला, दार पर चढ़ के मंसूर ने क्या कहा, दार पर चढ़ के मंसूर ने क्या कहा, सब बनाते खिलौने, सब बनाते खिलौने, बस रहा तू ही तू। अल्लाहू 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 Now let's move to another very popular devotional genre called Kafi. Kafi is also the name of one of the ragas in Hindustani Shastriya Sangeet. You don't have to mix this term with that raga because Kafi is also the poetical genre, poetical meter. And we have many poets from South Asia and especially Saraiki, Punjabi and Sindhi poets who have written in Kafi meters. And many musicians including Abda Parveen, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab and many others sing Kafi. The famous poet, the Sufis who have written Kafi is Khwaja Ghulam Farid, Baba Farid Shakarganj Baksh, Baba Bulle Shah, such as Sarmast. The meter of the Kafi is different than Qawwali and Ginans. They are mostly like in solo performance. There are sometimes chorus involved, but mainly solo performance. As I said, it is based on the poetical meters. A lot of emphasis is given into the way it is usually performed. Sometimes you also bring other poems and other couplets, doha, while you are reciting the Kafi. Just to give you in a contemporary context, one example is you may have heard song Chaiya Chaiya from A.R. Rahman's composition, and Gulzar Saab wrote that song. And this song originally was written by Baba Bulle Shah, Tere Ishq Nachaya Karke Thaiya Thaiya, and which also got Filmfare Award. Unfortunately, Anu Malik's Mera Piya Garaya and Anand Bakshi's Tu Cheez Badi Mas Mas also got Filmfare Award. So you can realize the level of that award. But anyways, when A.R. Rahman and Gulzar Saab received the award, they were generous enough, especially Gulzar Saab, and he said, you know, this award doesn't belong to me. The credit goes to the original composer, and that is Baba Bulle Shah. So I will demonstrate a Kafi written by Satsal Sarmast in Saraiki language, and there are a lot of metaphors in this Qawwali, and one can really see the significance of calling the name of Ali, because in all the Sufi orders they believe that the door to spirituality is through Ali, except Naqshbandiya. And the metaphor in this particular Kafi is it's very profound. It is about a clay pot, that a lover is holding a clay pot which is causing pain to a lover, and the beloved says that I would like to break this pot because it is causing pain to my beloved. And then as a response, a clay pot replied that please don't break me. You don't know what I have gone through. I was just a mud. I was pulled out from my source. I was beaten. I was molded. I was thrown into a fire. I was sold in a market for just few cents. And I was lucky. My beloved saw me, and since then I am with my beloved. So the moral of the story is that if you want to follow the path of love, understand the path of love is not an easy path. You will be beaten, you will be molded. But if your love is sincere, eventually you will become one, visal or union with your beloved. And at the end, the poet says that Peer Pira, Hazrat Mira, and he also he also seek forgiveness and also spiritual enlightenment through Maula Ali. So I will demonstrate and try to demonstrate this kafi, originally sung by Abda Parveen, and it is in Ahir Bhairav, Rag Ahir Bhairav, and again it is in 8-beat rhythmic cycle.
O Mia, O Bala, O Vegana de Kuband Sata, O मेरे महबूब दी चेंज रंजाई वो एक बार घड़ेदा दूजा बार पानी दा तीजा वेंदा ए जान दे नाल बाह मड़ोड़ी चूड़े वाली दूजी गल गिराटी पाई वो सुन मियां साहिब डिना, सुन मियां साहिब डिना बत गड़े दा हो साड़ी उम्र गई अजाई हो माही यार दी गढ़ोली भर दी हो साड़ी उम्र गई अजाई हो माही यार दी गढ़ोली भर दी हो सोने यार दी गढ़ोली भर दी हिक अल्लाह कनू माही भर दी हिक मौला कनू माही भर दी हाँ माही यार दी गढ़ोली हक मौला माही यार दी गढ़ोली भर दी सोने यार दी गढ़ोली हक मौला माही यार दी गढ़ोली भर दी दम दम अली 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 दम दम पीर पीरा पीर पीरा हजरत मीरा हो पीर पीरा पीर पीरा हजरत मीरा नाम जिदे जिह टुटिया जंजीरा हो मैं मुर्शिद कामिल कर दी हो मैं मुर्शिद हादी कर दी हाँ माही यार दी गड़ोली हक मौला माही यार दी गड़ोली भर दी ओ सोने यार दी गड़ोली हक मौला माही यार दी गड़ोली भर दी हिक अल्लाह कनू माही भर दी हिक मौला कनू माही भर दी दम अली दम 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 दम सच्चल सारा सच्चल सारा नूर इलाही हाँ सच्चल सारा ओ सच्चल सारा नूर इलाही अली वली दे गए हमराई ओ मैं हरदम रब रब कर दी ओ मैं हरदम रब रब कर दी दम अली दम दम अली दम दम अली दम दम माही यार दी गड़ोली भर दी सोने यार दी गड़ोली भर दी ओ माही यार दी गड़ोली भर दी सोने यार दी गड़ोली भर दी हिक अला कनू माही भर दी हिक मौला कनू माही भर दी हाँ माही यार दी गड़ोली हक मौला माही यार दी गड़ोली भर दी सोने यार दी गड़ोली हक मौला माही यार दी गड़ोली भर दी.
Now let's move to a wonderful genre which was created by our Ismaili peers in Indian subcontinent called Ginans. Interestingly, the term Ismailis one cannot even find in the Ginanic traditions because we were called Satpanthis. And then of course within Satpanths there are different subgroups such as Khojas, Shamsis, Mahamargis and many others, Mumnas. So Ginans were composed by the peers and dais who were sent by the Imam starting from 11th century all the way to the modern times in 20th century. Sayyid Nuruddin or Pir Sadgur Nur, according to our tradition, was the first composer, and then one of the last ones, Sayyida Imam Begum, a woman composer. Ginans are written in many languages. Some of them are as short as 4 stanzas and some of them are as long as 750 stanzas. Ginans were composed in many different styles, musical meters, and it has very rich mystical meanings, layers of mystical meanings, and our Satpan communities and Khoja communities have revered these Ginans very close to their heart. Just to give you an example that our Imams were not physically present in Indian subcontinent for 700 years, but many of our generation comes from the Indian subcontinent and they have kept their Satpan tradition alive through the recitation of these devotional genre called Ginans. So here I would focus more on the musical aspect of Ginan. So there are some misunderstanding within our community as well as outsider that perhaps some feel that Ginans are more or less very similar to the bhajan tradition, and some think that Ginans are based on Hindustani classical music only. But throughout my research, and I have wrote a PhD dissertation on the sound and recitation of the Ismaili Ginan, it's really profound and enriching to know that Ginans were composed not only by one composer. There are range of composers, range of languages, range of dialects, and there are mixed languages as well, full of metaphor, full of richness. So one can see that there are different styles and genres are also very prominent in the Ginanic tradition. In fact, I have this author, Sabte Hassan, from Pakistan. He wrote this book called Pakistan Mein Tehzeeb Ka Irtiqa, and in which he has given the first Punjabi and Sindhi poet, according to his research, to our Pir. And he said Pir Shams and his Ginan-e-Sabaga was the first Punjabi poem, and Pir Sadruddin was the first Sindhi poet. Utti Allana Gure Bandai is mentioned, and also Saraiki Ginan Ekatirat, he has given that kind of a tribute to our Pir. So it's really enriching. It's not only the tunes and the Ginans and hymns which we recite. It is deeply and spiritually connected with the culture in which they were composed. Just to give you a little bit more significance, is that if you go deep down into the musicality of the Ginans, one can find the Kafi tradition, which I have spoken to you earlier about Sachal Sarmas. Our Ginan, which we always recite before our evening dua, Asha Ji, is based on the Kafi thought. If you look at, for example, Vai, which are composed in the Sindhi meters, and Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai's music is full of Vais, one can find that our Ginans, many of them are also composed in the Vai tradition. And then Dhal tradition of Gujarat, many of our Garbis were composed based on the Dhal music. And when you're talking about Shastriya Sangeet, classical Sangeet, there are many Ginans which are based on classical music. And one of the examples which I'm going to present to you was composed by Sayyida Imam Begum, and she died in early 20th century in Karachi, and she used to compose and recite Ginan while accompanying herself into a sarangi musical instrument, which is the bow instrument. And she has written and composed her Ginans beautifully based on Shastriya Sangeet. So the Ginan which I would like to demonstrate is Ay Rahman Rahman, beautifully written in Hindi Urdu language, and it has 4 stanzas, 4 couplets, and it is written in Rag Mishra Kafi. So one can say Kafi, but one note is touching both the authentic Kafi as well as an odd note, and it is composed in Rupak Tal, which is the 7 beat. And you can also double it if you want, 7 into 14, and which becomes a Deep Chandi. So I would like to demonstrate that.
Rahima, Rahimana, Abba tu Rahima karogi. Ai Rahima, Rahima, e jita namana dhana gura ko ara pana ki jitana mana dhana gura ko ara pana ki je to bina ne gina ginana aba tu Rahima karogi. Ai Rahima, Rahima, e ji kahe ta Imama Begum mera pira Hasan Shah kahe ta Imama Begum mera pira Hasan Shah to imane imana aba tu Rahima karogi. Ai Rahima, Rahimana, aba tu Rahima karogi. Ai Rahima, Rahima.
Plato once said, music is a moral law. It gives soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, a charm of sadness, gaiety and life to everything. At the end, I would like to conclude my session with one Hazar Imam excerpt which recently he has conveyed during his speech at the Aga Khan Music Award in 2019, where he said, "Listening to music, practicing music, sharing music, performing music have long been an intimate part of life for Muslim communities across the world, as has been the chanting of devotional and historical or epic text." So it is really important, vital for us to engage ourselves deeper into the practice of our faith through the devotional recitations, performances and chanting. Thank you very much. Now let's open the floor for Q&A. Yeah.